Hey, welcome to the Hunting Illinois podcast. Today we're actually going to have some reports to go over from last deer season. So we got Illinois came out with their deer harvest report, so we're going to go through that. And then the National Deer Association came out with their annual report they come out with. They're working with data from 2023, but we'll still go over it and kind of see what the national trends were and see how that matches up where Illinois was at now in 2024. But before we get going, we're going to go over some updates and things like that. So Dan, you got any updates and outdoor news and things?
Yeah, so it's getting to a fun time of year. Obviously, we're getting ready for spring turkey season, but like you said, in Illinois especially, it's never too early to start thinking about deer. And so today we are going to focus quite a bit on deer, and that's for a good reason. One, like you said, we got all these reports, but two, the big thing is if you're interested in obtaining a deer firearm or muzzleloader permit for the upcoming deer season next fall, the application is open now. So the first lottery opened March 4th. And closes April 30th. So you've still got about a month, but let's get those applications in. Now, during this first application period, it is residents only. So Illinois residents only are eligible to submit an application. And what's cool is the group hunt applications are accepted in Lottery 1. And so what that means is maybe you want to hunt with your buddy. Basically, you want all or nothing. Either Jason and I draw a permit or neither one of us does. We can put in as a group. And statistically, it does not impact your chances one way or the other of drawing a permit or not. So that option is available for the first lottery. So again, get those applications in by April 30th. And we are actually hosting kind of a new webinar for us. It's going to be April 29th, so right before this deadline. It's at 6 p.m. And essentially, we're going to sit down. We're going to go through a lot of the data reports that we're talking about today, and we're basically going to apply with you. So you'll see how to go through the process. What are we thinking about as we submit an application? What data sets are we looking at? So if you're interested in learning more about that application or just coming to hang out the day before that deadline, that's going to be April 29th at 6 p.m. You can visit learntohuntil.com for more information or to register for that webinar. But that should be a pretty fun one. Mm-hmm. A couple other dates. One coming up pretty quick, April 5th. So that's just a few days away from when we're recording this today on April 2nd. But April 5th, the Illinois trout season opens. This is the statewide season. And there are, I think I read 58 sites across Illinois this year that are opening on April 5th for this trout season. And you can visit ifishillinois.org for more information. That is ifishillinois.org for a complete list of locations, times, regulations, all that kind of stuff. But April 5th, that trout season opens. Like we mentioned right off the front, turkey season is just around the corner. So the days are getting longer. We're under some inclement weather here, so we'll hope that kind of subsides a little bit before the real turkey season starts. But we're talking April 7th, so that's just a few days away. That's the first day of turkey season in the South Zone. And that first segment will run April 7th through April 11th. In the North Zone, that season opens April 14th and closes April 18th for that first segment. So we're getting awfully close to getting geared up for turkey. So exciting times. But that's about all I got for kind of news updates and things like that. So
cool.
Yeah,
we're excited. We're going to be heading down south for our mentored hunt next week. We'll be down in the Shawnee camping and turkey hunting. Hopefully we'll get some luck, maybe get some fishing in too.
That's the best part about this time of year. It's just a good time to be outside. Yeah,
absolutely. So we have the Illinois report and then the national report. Which one would you like to go over first?
Yeah, let's start with, the Illinois report. We can kind of start there and kind of bop around. There's what's really nice about these reports is they're just a good snapshot of trends, of data, basically of the entire statewide harvest. And so I find this not only interesting and kind of just fun to read through, but I also find it fairly useful from like a hunt planning process. So we've got this report pulled up here. We'll drop links in the show notes and in the description so you can pull up these reports. But we'll try to basically say everything we're going over just in case you're listening via audio. But again, this is the summary of the 2024 Illinois deer seasons that Illinois DNR puts out each year. And again, it's just a very quick snapshot of harvest trends, of license trends, basically for the entire deer season. So we'll kind of start off just going over some very rough numbers, but harvest was pretty good last year. So if you look compared to pretty much since 2015, that was a record year for the past 9-10 years in terms of overall harvest in the state of Illinois. Still quite a bit shy of that record harvest in 2005, which was just over 201,000. Last year we were at about 171,000. But that's a pretty substantial increase year over year as we're seeing this trend basically from 2015, just steadily increase year over year. Again, there's some statistical fluctuations and statistical noise in there, but good news to see that deer harvest at 171,000 for last season was pretty good.
Yeah, looking over this, honestly, that record stuck out to me. I mean, that was a lot of deer compared to what we have been getting. I don't know what was going on in 2005, but that was way before I got out here. But that was a good year. Holy cow!
Yeah, that's a lot of deer, especially for a state like Illinois that just doesn't have a ton of habitat. Yeah. But yeah, so we'll kind of continue to go through this. This is a really good breakdown if you're just curious how many people are buying hunting licenses, how many people are buying different deer permit types. Gives a quick indication of that. But what's also interesting is they break it down and tell you how many non-resident hunters we have. So on average during the archery season, about 13% of our hunters were non-resident. For firearm, you're looking at about 7.7%. So substantially higher on the archery side of things, which again makes sense. We're very reliant on lottery systems like we just talked about for this first application period. Residents only for that first period. So pretty cool.
Yeah, most of your non-residents are becoming and hunting private land for gun season.
Exactly.
At all.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go back up real quick, it just shows across seasons, it's about a little over 9% was out-of-state hunters. So if you ever wonder how many hunters are actually out-of-state hunters, whenever you hear people talk about it in a good way or bad way, it's about 10%, at least for last year.
Yeah, and again, this is not necessarily. I know you know what you mean.
Permits.
But just to clarify, this isn't necessarily hunters. This is permit types.
Yeah.
So my assumption is if you're a non-resident hunter, you're probably not coming to just buy one tag. You're probably going to buy, your combination permit or something like that. But yes, so about 9% of our permits are non-resident. But this is the kind of stuff I fall in love with, and just being able to. So essentially, what we're looking at now is a bar graph chart that basically shows harvest by day of season. And so you can really start. We always hear, the magical period of whitetail hunting in Illinois is that end of October through mid-November. And this is a perfect illustration of that. You basically have, relatively low harvest numbers throughout October. And then when you get to about October 25th, October 30th, those numbers just really start to climb. And you're seeing a lot more harvest per day. And so that just really highlights, if you're just interested in, hey, I only have a set amount of time that I can hunt each year that I can, allocate for this. I have jobs, I have, kids, I have all these other commitments. Data like this can be really useful just for your planning purposes. But the vast majority of our deer in Illinois are harvested in that kind of 30 to 50 day period window. So we're kind of, basically peak rut right there.
Yep. Yeah, you could almost use that to time your vacation right now. If you want to go ahead and put in your leave, just go ahead and pick the highest bumps on that chart. And then also notice that, as you would expect, weekend days are going to be blips up. That's going to be when the most people can be out hunting. So if you can pick weekdays during those times when harvest is at its peak, you're probably giving yourself your best shot in the woods.
Yep. Well also, some of those dips right there, like the noise that you're seeing within the columns. There's some, like Curtis said, it could be a weekend there's a spike, and then right after that it dips down. That might be like a Monday, but it could also be weather events too. So, but the overall shape of that is definitely accurate for hunting activity as well as deer activity at the same time.
Absolutely. And
it almost looks like a heartbeat, right? What do they call that? A QRS wave?
I'll take your word for it.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But yeah, another really interesting thing, and this is something I've been following quite closely just because I find it very fascinating. And as a reminder, in Illinois, prior to 2017, you could not use a crossbow during the standard archery season. You had to either have a doctor's note, be of a certain age, prove you had some kind of disability. But in 2017, they basically removed that restriction and allowed anybody to utilize crossbows during that standard archery season. And what's really interesting is just watching the changes year over year on how much of the archery harvest is comprised of crossbow harvest. And this year it was pretty high. So this year, the 2024 season, 53.9% of our deer during archery season were harvested with a crossbow, 45% were with your standard compound bow, and 1.1% were with traditional bows. And so we're seeing crossbows take up a vast majority of the archery harvest in recent years. So I find that pretty interesting, especially, as a new hunter, we interact with a lot of new hunters, right? And oftentimes, I was at the parking lot and they're giving me crap because I'm out here with a crossbow. That's why I wanted to bring this up, to show you are actually in the majority these days. So keep that in mind.
That's how my husband got his
next page
deer.
down, right there, Dan. I think that shows when it transferred over. What did you say there, Lauren?
Oh, that's my husband got his with his crossbow.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
He's a gun guy, and in Illinois, you don't get a lot of opportunity. So that's what he decided to do, and worked out well for us.
And I still love my compound bow, but I've taken my wife's crossbow out a few times. And the big thing is, where I live now, I can't just, I grew up in Missouri in kind of the outskirts of St. Louis on a pretty decent sized piece of land, a couple acres, which out there is quite big. I could just shoot my bow in my backyard whenever I wanted to. And so I became really proficient with it. But these days I live in the middle of subdivision. Our city basically has a blanket ban on shooting archery equipment in your yard. You basically have to go to a range, become a member. And so it's this entire process where with the crossbow, I can shoot it a few times every couple of weeks, feel very competent, very comfortable with it. And so a lot of times I've just kind of started picking that up just due to the time constraint of not having the opportunity to practice as much as I would like with my compound stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes down to it takes less time to use them. They also tend to be more affordable to get one that is a decent level of quality. So I mean, they're more affordable and it takes less time to get good at it. And they are easier to use. You don't have to move when you go to shoot the animal. It's like shooting a gun. So all that combined, it's really easy to get into the sport that way through that. And I mean, you can just see the trend over time. I mean, back in 2015, 2016, for those that can't see this graph right now, crossbows were about 15% of a harvest. And then 17 was 30, and then 36, 44. And then finally in 2021, it went to 51. And then the past 3 years, it's been 53%.
It feels like it's almost stabilized a little bit to some extent.
Yeah, a little bit.
But I do.
Yeah, which is what I wanted to point out on the graph. I think it has stabilized. Yeah. It is still increasing, but there is something inherently cool about shooting traditional archery. And I think we're seeing that kind of break-even point where there's always going to be about that many people who are going to choose the tougher route, because, that needing to draw on the animal makes it infinitely tougher, but there's a lot of people that are going to take that because they like shooting bows. We know people that aren't even that much into hunting, but they just love shooting bows so much that is what got them into hunting. And I mean, I'm in that camp. I love my vertical bow, and I could not see myself turning it down for anything else because I want to make myself go out there and shoot. And so got it. Both tactics. Nothing wrong with starting out with a vertical bow too. Just realize it's a little bit trickier, and I think we are getting stabilized where it's pretty much going to be similar to that moving forward.
Agreed. And kind of next thing I wanted to bring up a little bit, obviously we are very much impacted by this kind of 5-county restricted archery zone. And if you're new to this, essentially in the central part of the state. So we're talking Champaign County, Douglas, Macon, Moultrie, and Payette. Illinois basically saw that their deer numbers in that area was a lot lower than they wanted it to be. So to meet those management objectives, they basically close out a little bit of some of the archery regulations. So essentially, you cannot shoot an antlerless deer in those counties for the first month. It has to be an antlered deer. And the theory is, again, who creates the population? It's the female. So you want to keep those females, keep as many on the landscape as you can to hopefully rebound that deer population in those specific areas. Now, I bring that up to say there is a few references in this specific report that talks like they might expand some of those areas. And some of those areas are not necessarily in the central part of the state. Again, this is not set in stone. This is just on this report. But it essentially says that these counties are being currently considered for inclusion in this restricted archery zone, but to check back to the IDNR website prior to next deer season for confirmation whether they were added or not. But essentially, we're talking about Tazewell, Mason County over there near Havana, Logan County, so that includes Lincoln. But then we're getting over there near the western portion of the state. So we're talking Morgan, Scott, and Greene County. And then we're talking all the way south. We're talking Pulaski, Mazick, a little bit on the east near Wabash. So if you're in these areas, definitely kind of pay attention to those restrictions and regulations. But we'll see how that transpires over time. But definitely something to keep in mind.
Biological data goes into that decision making?
I do not.
Really, we're figuring this out in real time right now because we are kind of talking about this for the first time together. We've all kind of picked this apart, but can we pick one of those counties, Dan, and then scroll down to the end of this report, and it breaks down the counties per their harvest, and see if they had a cruddy harvest or something like that?
The problem is
looking at
a little bit, but you'd have to pull up different years because this is not a report. This is just 2024, so this only has this year's data. And for something like that, you'd want to look at. Honestly, I'd probably look at like the past 5 to 7 years and try to come up with a trend line where I don't think you'd get that just from a snapshot from one county in one particular year. But that might make a good kind of follow up to this episode.
Yeah, but I mean, if last year's the year they're deciding to do it, though, I would imagine that it would be low. If the trend is low, then that means that last year's trend should be at least low. If it's worth looking at, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you remember one of the counties that was in that list there? Sorry if I don't know off the top of my head.
Let me check.
Tazewell, I believe you said.
Yeah, Tazewell.
Yeah, for me, I wish they would include a little more justification when they, propose changes like that. Because, it just leaves me wondering, because I feel like a little confused when it's conflicting information. With some places, it's like, more seasons, we're going to tack on more seasons, we're going to take all the does we want. And then in some places, we're going to limit that for the first bit of the season. So,
and I'll tell you what. From a personal perspective, make sure you follow this. Luckily, I saved myself, but I was actually hunting a piece of public land last year that was under this restriction, and I was very close to harvesting a doe. The first week or so of the season, I just got caught up in the moment, but luckily, I had that moment of realization, like, oh, crap, I cannot take this doe. And so always, always, always pay attention to those site-specific regs as well as some of those county regs because you don't want those to come back to haunt you. And they could change from year to year. But definitely stay tuned, and we'll post anything if we hear anything concrete about these new county restrictions. We'll definitely put some videos, some podcast episodes, and definitely post on our social media channels and stuff if we hear anything else.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Illinois is a big state. There's forests in some parts of it more than others, and there's more habitat for deer in some parts more than others. So the deer population is going to be restricted by habitat and resources and things like that. So the way they manage one section is going to be different than the other. And they also have the EHD issues, as we talked about before, and we think that might be why the Champaign County area...
That was definitely why it was enacted in this area. But I just don't have enough historical knowledge on those because they're so scattered across the state.
So, it would be nicer to have some backup and not just a little blurb saying, heads up, next year they might have these problems here. They don't have anything really going deeper into it than that.
But kind of the last thing I want to touch on in this specific report, and then we'll kind of transition over to the NDA, which I like the NDA because it's really good at just like seeing what the landscape of deer looks like in this country. And so just looking state, it's really cool. So we'll dive into that. But one thing, I thought this was a pretty nice bump. We saw basically one of the higher seasons we've ever seen in terms of youth deer season permits issued. We had over 15,561 kids get a youth deer season tag last year. That's fantastic. That's up quite a bit from the year prior, 2023. We're talking 13,000. But we go back to 2020, we're only talking 10,000. So that's quite a bit of growth in just some recent years. So I love seeing that, love seeing the next generation getting out there. Unfortunately, they didn't have as good harvest as they had in recent years. So harvest was actually down, even though permit sales were up quite a bit. But if I recall, there was definitely some weather conditions. It was pretty rainy, if I recall correctly, during that time. So I'm not entirely surprised that harvest was a little bit down, but it's still up substantially from like 2021, where they harvested 1,800 during the youth season. Last year we harvested about 4,000.
Yep.
If you scroll up a little bit too, I think it said the permit changed to be like statewide as well for youth. So I wonder if that had an impact.
Could be. Yeah.
Another thing I wonder about is just the inclusion of rifles. Does that have an impact? Is that more convenient for some of these youth to hunt with?
And I really hope, similar to what we get with this crossbow over time, where we get to see, crossbow basically overtake vertical. I hope they start, and they may already have that, but start collecting data, because I would love to see what % of our deer was harvested by rifle last year versus shotgun.
Well, it's in there. It's in there.
Yep. Next page down.
Yeah. I'm super surprised at how high it is. 29%, I think.
Yeah.
I did not think it would be that high.
Wow.
I know handgun users were only 1%, but that they dropped down to about 0.5%. And I wonder if a lot of them, because basically the rifle rules are handgun rules, so I wonder if a lot of them just picked up their rifle because they just don't like shotguns.
Wow, that's really high.
So folks who can't see this, last year in 2023, it was 20%, 20.5%, and in 2024 it was at 29.89%.
Yeah, basically 30. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
30.
So 30. Yep.
So 30% of our deer harvest was with the rifle, and that didn't exist 2 years ago in this state. That's cool.
Almost
What's really
a
interesting
third.
is how many of those
that means people are buying new equipment.
That's exactly
for the most part.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That just shows you how hungry they are to to have more access, I guess.
That's neat. I'm glad you brought that up. I missed that.
Consistently, obviously here showing it's around 11 and then it's dropped a little bit, but is that fairly normal for most, in general?
It varies so much state to state, because a lot of it depends on the season structure. So let's say like a state like Missouri, their muzzleloader season essentially became what they call an alternative season. And so in Illinois, we have this standard muzzleloader season, which is very specific on what kind of firearms you can use. But there's also been a lot of changes to the way that individual sites allow muzzleloader hunters. When I first moved here, there was a couple sites in our specific area that I could just go buy an over-the-counter muzzleloader tag and just go hunt. Those have been changed, and now they're a part of the lottery. And so I think you're probably seeing some of that reduction. And some of those sites did kind of make this change back in the mid, 2022 or so. So I'm assuming that's probably some of it is just, there's just not a ton of opportunity out there. Because the whole theory behind, adding a muzzleloader season is it's another opportunity to get out there with another method of take, essentially. And so a lot of people aren't going to take it unless it's an additive season that they now get to partake in. But if it's just replacing your firearm, most people are not going to do it. That makes stick sense. With their center fire. Yeah,
that makes sense.
But yeah, that's about all I got for the Illinois report. Anybody else got any kind of last minute thoughts? I mean, again, there's a lot more in this report that we're not even going through. We're just kind of quickly skimming through it, but there's a lot here.
The one thing I noticed back with the restricted archery zone, with the special regulations, it talks about how they've done this before and it was highly successful in East Central Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing I wish there was more information on, what counts as successful? What was the goal? How long did it take? Was it, you know what I mean? It's just, I agree. I just kind of was I want more. I need a footnote.
Give me some meat. Yeah. Yep. Cool. Well, should we transition over to the NDA report? This thing is a beast.
Yes.
Sure.
All right. Let me get my screen share set up here. Again, we'll post links to all this stuff in the description below. But again, the thing I really like about this report is it's just such a good snapshot of the overall landscape of deer management in this country. But what I really like, too, is it's written for the public. It's not this super technical, super data-driven document. Again, there's a lot of data there, but it's easy to read data. So highly recommend giving this some attention, giving this some thought. But I'll let you kind of, Curtis, take it away. And was there anything that jumped out to you right off the start?
Well, first off, I just want to echo that it's very digestible, which is refreshing, because so often when you find reports like this, they seem to be written so that, that the author has multiple PhDs. I'm going to think of every big word I know and throw it in here, but kudos to NDA. This really, I think, reads well. And I think one of the coolest things about this report is if you start looking at this and watching it and looking at changes year to year, what you can do is actually look at how management changes affect some of these big hunting stats in a way that's never been possible before, which to me is amazing. You know, if you see a state like Indiana make a big regulation change going down to $1 from $2, you check on this report in the next couple years and see what happens, and that's a good clue what could happen anywhere else that makes a big change like that. So to me, it's awesome. At a glance, you can look at that stuff, and then if you couple that with knowing about regulation changes that are happening in any particular states, I mean, holy cow, you can learn more about deer hunting, deer management in this one report than arguably people in the past could do with years and years of study. So pretty awesome. But yeah, just talking, it starts off with everybody is worried about bucks, you know, so top states for bucks. No surprises here. Texas shouldn't really count because it's so big, but it's more than double the next state on there. So with over 420,000 antlered bucks harvested, Texas leads that list. But Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Missouri make up the top 5 there. And so obviously we know those states, really good habitat, really good forest, but also a lot of hunters, because it does take both of those things to get there in the top of the antlered buck harvest. If you look at per square mile, so this is taken into account the area. Now Texas is not in the top 5 anymore, and it's your old home state, Jason, Pennsylvania, leading the list there at 3.8 bucks per square mile. That's amazing. How do you even drive across Pennsylvania?
That's wild.
Very slowly.
That's it. Maryland's 3rd.
Yeah, Maryland, yeah. So, and you wouldn't think of Maryland, but I guess, yeah, it is such a small land area.
And we have a lot of smaller farms as well. Like there's like a lot of like corn and cows and horses. So it's a lot of stuff that deer can kind of hang into. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good habitat.
That's where I grew up.
Small area. Louisiana surprises me, though. Louisiana's 4th on that list at 3.2. It seems those southern, when I think of antlered bucks, I just don't think of states that far south.
No, and what's interesting is if you look at the chart directly below that looks at the increase over 5-year average in terms of buck harvest, Louisiana jumped 31, Florida 18.
Yeah.
I mean, these are states that, like you just said, I would not have expected to be big antler deer states, but over the past 5 years, they're seeing insane increases.
I wonder, too, if, like, we've talked about how kind of the waterfowl hunting has shifted a little bit, so if people are looking for some other stuff to do.
There's probably some truth to that, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. But, yeah, it's what are they doing down there to get that kind of increase, you know? Is that some kind of shift where it's maybe a lot easier to get doe tags, and so more does are getting harvested? I don't know. But.
And what's interesting is that we should probably clarify, that's not just like plus 31. That's 31% increase over their 5-year average. I mean, that's substantial.
This is their, like, 2005 harvest. You know, like, it'll be the one they're referring to for decades.
That's really interesting to see, though.
Yeah, almost a third more than just 5 years ago.
Yeah. And then if you look down at the next chart, there's even some more interesting. Greatest antlered buck harvest per 100 deer hunters. So this is another good way of kind of normalizing the data from state to state. And what do we see at the top? South Carolina, followed by Louisiana,
73.
followed by Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, and Virginia.
Yeah, that's insane. In South Carolina, you got 73 out of 100 hunters getting antlered bucks. That is unfathomable.
I'm going to South Carolina.
Hang out in the mountains and then hit the beach on your way back.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And we're talking all southern states, you know, so all states with really high deer populations. And
Yeah, look at that first sentence there on the one paragraph there. It says that comparing the 2023 buck harvest to this previous 5-year average, was that 23 of 37 states, so 62% of states saw an increase of buck harvest compared to their 5-year average in 2023. So it was a great year for buck harvest in 2023 across the board. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, so is that just more emphasis on quality deer management or what? Interesting to think about.
Yes, it is. Especially because it's so regional, right? Like, to me, that I shouldn't say it instantly tells me, but it definitely makes me lean that, hey, that's probably not a huge regulation thing that shifted, since we're seeing, unless all these states, came together and decided, hey, let's change something. But to me, it seems almost outside of a regulatory change that would do, because that's so regional.
Yeah. I mean, PA is a point state. PA, you have to have three points on one side, maybe 4 points on one side. I don't know if they changed it since I was a kid, but around the time in the early 2000s when I was just starting hunting, I think they put that in around maybe 2005, 2006. You had to have 3 points on one side, I believe. So that might be why there's so many bucks in Pennsylvania to shoot. And I don't think that counts for youth. So I think youth, at least before, I don't know what the new laws are, but if you're under 16, you could shoot anything. So
that's how I grew up too. Missouri was that way. We had to have 4 on one side except for the youth season. So I shot a lot of spikes back in my day during the youth season.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you talked about how that makes more bucks, but it also cuts a good portion of the bucks out of your pool of potential, harvestable deer. So it seems like it would be a net even almost thing that probably just resulted in larger bucks being taken. But well, Pennsylvania's obviously doing things right. But the next part of this report, it goes state by state. And so you can look beyond the top 5. And obviously we're interested in Illinois, so we'll look through there. And Illinois, obviously no slouch when it comes to deer. We don't have nearly as many hunters as some of those states like Michigan, Wisconsin. I know in Wisconsin when I was there, they talked about the Orange Army. They sell something like 800,000 deer licenses or something like that. So we're less than half of that. So some of these comparisons are a little bit unfair, just so you know. But basically this chart, we've got the years 21, 22, 23, and then the percent change. And in Illinois, pretty stable, really, but it is increasing. So 8% up across the board to 79,000 in the most recent year. So not, I would call it pretty stable, but increasing. So going the right direction for us.
Yeah. Probably about what I would expect. A 10% change to the 2023 5-year average. It feels about right.
Yeah, and then last year was even higher because it was over 80,000.
Yeah, I mean, just anecdotal. Again, I hate using anecdotal stuff when we're talking hard numbers here. But I know just us, talking last year when we were hunting, we've seen more bucks the past 2 years than and we hunt public land, and we're seeing not only the quality of bucks that we're seeing, but the quantity. I mean, I remember, Jason, was it last year, the year before, you saw, I don't think you even saw doe for the first 3 weeks of the season. It was just big buck after big buck after big buck.
Everything was out of range, but I was seeing them at least. But yeah, well, one was they were or in a thicket that I couldn't shoot through. But I think I saw four mature bucks and then 2 young bucks in the first week of November. Yep.
I mean again, completely anecdotal, but that seems to align pretty closely with what some of this data is showing.
Yeah, and our bucks per square mile, 1.4. So we're right in there. Indiana's 1.6. Iowa's 0.8. So that was kind of surprising that we're actually higher than Iowa. But then you do got some states like Michigan that are 3.7. But again, they've got so many hunters that helps inflate that a little bit. Wisconsin at 2.7. But somewhere in the mid ones, that's a solid number. And then as far as the number of hunters out of 100 that got antlered bucks, we're at 34 in Illinois. So that's a much more reasonable number. About a third of the hunters out there getting antlered bucks, and that seems pretty. I mean, that's pretty par for the course, I feel like. You look across there, there's a couple outliers, like Kansas is at 45. You know, that's pretty good for the Midwest. And obviously Michigan's up there again at almost 40. South Dakota, no, that's, what is that? Ohio and South Dakota, yeah, 44.
But yeah, we're pretty well positioned above the regional average, though. So that's good.
Why is Minnesota so low? Is that Minnesota? Looks like Minnesota.
Yeah, they've had a pretty bad. You can look. I mean, just their trend is not doing well. So we were talking about a 10% change here in Illinois over the 5-year average in terms of buck harvest percent, antlered buck harvest. In Minnesota, they're minus 11% over that 5-year average. Nebraska minus 20.
And one thing that immediately comes to mind with Minnesota, and it would be in Michigan and Wisconsin to some extent too, is just the wolves. And more of Minnesota is in wolf range than Michigan and Wisconsin. So both of those do have a lot of deer hunting territory that's outside of wolf range. Minnesota does too, but not nearly as much, if I'm not mistaken. So what wolves do they not only make fewer deer on the landscape, but they also make hunting tougher, you know, because now all of a sudden the deer, instead of only being hunting during the season, those deer are hunted year round, day, night, all the time. So they're wary critters to the ninth degree. So I wonder if that has anything to do with it there in Minnesota too.
I bet there's some of that at play for sure.
So I don't think they've had quite the drought in Minnesota as they've had in a lot of these western states to be anything like drought driven.
Right. Like that. That's why I expect Nebraska. I mean, I think that's why they're so low, is just they've got such bad drought years. Yeah. Down 20%. Yeah.
Yeah. Those western states are up and down like a yo-yo, but
yeah. I mean, we've even seen it in Wyoming with the antelope stuff. You know, they had a pretty bad die off in their antelope herd and had to cut permit allocations quite a bit.
Places with bad winters and bad summers.
Yeah. And availability of water. It's a big one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But yeah, so then we get into the age structure of buck harvest, and this is, now we're talking about quality, not just quantity. So now people looking for big bucks, and not necessarily to say that old bucks are always big bucks. We know that. But in general, if deer do get up into that 4, 5, 6-year-old range, they're reaching their mature age. They're probably much larger than these younger bucks. And lowest percentage of yearling bucks in the harvest, Oklahoma at 7. That's a little bit surprising. After that, it gets to a lot of the southern states that we saw before that I feel like makes sense. But Oklahoma seems like a little bit of an outlier there at 7. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and then the highest percentage of yearling bucks in the harvest. And to me, like, this graph kind of shows either people don't care about big bucks or it's tough hunting and you're going to take what you can get. And it's probably that.
Those are all, except Wisconsin, those are all pretty tiny. It's Delaware, Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. So those are all pretty little states, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and low deer density, I know, at least in a cut like Maine, you know, that's tough hunting, dealing with other predators, too, and low number of deer per square mile. Wisconsin does surprise me in there, too, though, and I don't know if that's just coupled with so many hunters and tough hunting / different age structure of the deer because of all the CWD that they've got. Not sure. But the highest percentage of the 3.5 plus bucks, this is the one, it's Oklahoma, which again, I guess it makes sense because they were the lowest on there. But why? Why is everybody in Oklahoma shooting old bucks? Do they not have that many hunters? They have a ton of deer, a little bit of both. I don't know. After that, it's all the southern states, the players, you know, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas. High deer populations and hunters are able to be picky, so they can wait for that 3.5 plus year old buck because they're getting a ton of opportunities.
Yeah, I think that plays a lot into it. I know the state size does play into it, but definitely the idea of the harder hunting versus the a bigger population definitely would play into that. I know I got to give my uncle a shout out, Kurt, for hunting up in Maine for past 30 years. He's lived up there, and I think he's only got skunked 1 year. So I think that puts him in the top 1% of Maine hunters.
Can't argue with that.
It's probably wrecking the curve there.
Yeah, they're not the biggest deer in the world, but he gets one at least every year.
And just since we're talking about, this percent of basically age structure, I really find this chart pretty fascinating too, which is just basically percent of yearling bucks, so we're talking the 1.5-year-old deer, in the U.S. antlered harvest. And that has changed substantially since I was, a kid. In 1989, 62% of the antlered harvest was considered yearling bucks. In 2023, that was down to 26%. That is a drastic change. And I know a lot of that is due to the hunting community, the hunting culture, the industry. QDMA was extremely popular throughout the 90s and early 2000s, and we're definitely starting to see a lot of the benefits of that. And you can see it's really stable. We started to get in like this 25 to 26% harvest at about 2018, 2019, and it's basically just flatlined ever since then. I find that really interesting.
I wonder if it'll stay about that, because there's always going to be people who are just in it for the meat. You know what I mean? Like, we'll go with whatever. We'll go with whatever comes by.
I would assume so, unless we see some big changes in the way that states are managing CWD. But other than that, I don't see that changing drastic. And well, I shouldn't say there could be some food shortages that just cause people to shoot deer and fill the freezer. But
I was about to say, I'm like, what if food prices go up substantially?
It also could change the other way if they just have a really bad reproduction year across a big portion of the country. Because if those young bucks aren't there, you can't shoot them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, they're going to be more susceptible to those environmental changes than others. But, you got to think the yearling bucks are always going to be the easiest deer in the woods to hunt. Because not only are they the most naive, because they're the youngest, does will be the same age, but then the bucks have the added, I guess I should call it, what should I call it, like roadblock of having testosterone that makes them want to investigate everything in the world that time of year. So, in 1989, those people, they were happy to get anything. So when those yearling bucks came in, hey, we're going to meet in the freezer. And now, with all the cultural shift of going to big bucks, I feel like it's going to be pretty stable if there's not any big shift in the reproduction, which hopefully there wouldn't be.
I mean, and going back to that chart of that trend, I mean, you got the 1990s was the magazine era of hunting when you had all the magazine covers with large bucks on it, and people were like, how the heck can I get that? And that's when this really kicked off. And then to have social media reinforce that culture over time, it's really helped drive that number down.
And we should clarify, just if you're brand new to reading graphs, this one is very deceiving at first glance unless you actually look closely at it. So the first 3 data points are not separated by 1 year like every other data points. Those are actually separated by about a decade. So just kind of keep that in mind if you're actually physically looking at this graph. But because it certainly deceived me the first time I was looking. I was like, wait, how did we go from 1989 to 2009 and just 2 data points? What happened? But
Yep. Basically, that was the 90s, so it dropped substantially and then carried on going down for those who are Audible listeners. Again, from like 69 to 26%?
62 in 1989 to 26% in 2023.
Of yearling bucks being harvested, yep.
Yeah, so almost 2/3 down to 1/4.
Yep.
That's drastic.
That's a change for sure.
But then of course we got it state by state, and we can look at Illinois, and again, pretty stable, which is good news. We like stability because that means our harvest and our deer numbers are properly aligned, and we'll take that. So 2021 we were at 36, 2022 we were at 36, 2023 at 35. So only dropped by 1%, and that could be statistical noise. That's such a small change. But that's a good number. You look across Indiana, 23, 33, 23, so they're a little bit more up and down, but definitely the average lower than us. That's for 1.5-year-olds, and we don't have any data for the 2.5 or 3.5-year-olds. unfortunately, and I guess that's just because of the questions we ask at harvest time. It seems like they would be able to maybe tease that out, but I guess they do not.
I think they even do in the DNR report. I wonder if that just data wasn't transferred over, because I know thinking back to my college days in the wildlife techniques, I think the whole reason we take that measurement from the nose to the eye is essentially to get a facial measure that then you can use to not necessarily age, but put it into an age class.
Mm-hmm. Can you, after we're done here, we can hop back over to the 2024 report. I think it's in there. It was at the very end. We didn't look at the age structure breakdown of the deer harvest, but it was at the very end. And I think it goes into that detail.
Okay.
Perfect. So they might not have shared it with NDA.
Yeah, because I was going to say, with that measurement, they should have had it, like you said, Dan.
I think they do. This might not have shared it for some reason.
Or it might be in a different format than it's used here, and so they can't use that data. Who knows?
Who knows?
But
yeah, who knows? You see a lot of data gaps, though, for the older age groups, but
that's why I
find
just us. What's that?
Mm-hmm.
I've said it's not just us.
Right.
Don't be like, why aren't we collecting? Like, there were several states on there, and throughout. I mean, there's states throughout that are missing data. So
that's why this document to me is so impactful and so cool to dive through. Is because, again, every state manages things so differently, asks different questions, collects different data points, that something like this did not exist, 5 or 6 years ago. You didn't have this conglomerate of all these different figures from every state. And if you did, it was like 10,000 pages, because it would just be every state's report combined into one report. But being able to see these compare is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And then we're getting into the antlerless deer harvest. And to me, this really tells you what states are deer hunters, because now we're not buck hunting, we're deer hunting. These are antlerless deer. So these are walking back straps and deer roast and deer burger and all those other yummy things. And again, no surprise, Texas, it's just huge. So again, it's a little bit unfair, but it leads it. And then, of course, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Georgia, Alabama. So states that have a high number of hunters, good deer habitat, getting a lot of does, a lot of them. Per square mile, Pennsylvania, once again, up there at the top at 5.8. 5.8 antlerless deer per square mile. Pretty cool. And then after that, got some small states, Delaware, Maryland, and then southern states, South Carolina, Mississippi.
Not Texas big, but, bigger.
Yeah, big compared to those little...
Yeah, I was going to say nothing's Texas big. That's not true. But you can drive for 8 hours and still be in Texas. So, in my mind, that's a big state.
I've done it. Alaska's Texas big, but they don't... they're deer... And they have so much fewer hunters that they would never make this list. But anyway, if we look at per 100 deer hunters, this is pretty cool. South Carolina at 80. Which is pretty high, but it's kind of interesting that it's not that much higher than the amount of bucks per 100. What was that, like 76? So
I feel like 76, yeah.
Yeah, not that much higher. Pretty interesting. And these
73.
all basically 73, yeah. So a little different, but not too much different. A lot of southern states there. And then for the antlerless deer per buck harvest, so this is how many does per antlered buck are people getting, and Delaware is leading that list at 2.4, and they're far and away the leader, followed by Alabama, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Iowa, Maryland, and Mississippi. But all those states are in the 1.5, 1.3, pretty similar. Delaware is the 2.4, so I wonder if they've got some kind of earn-a-buck system or something to inflate those numbers.
I believe they do. I think we came to that same conclusion last year when we looked at this. I think I googled up Delaware regs, and I think that is the case.
Awesome. Well, looky there. We have the same thoughts 2 years in a row. That must mean it's valid. And then if we look at the state-by-state breakdown, we can, of course, check out Illinois, which we didn't make the top fives, but not too shabby numbers there. Again, pretty stable, so down 4%, but, that can be statistical noise. That can honestly even be hunter preference.
We saw
more
the buck
people
go
shot
10%
bucks.
increase.
Yeah.
There's going to be
so
a
does that
trade-off.
just mean... you only got room in your freezer for one deer, and it was a buck, not a doe. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Our numbers are 77, 84, 81,000. Pretty consistent and, pretty similar with states near us that are the same size with similar number of hunters. So not too shabby there. What else do we got here? So our antlerless deer per square mile, 1.5. So pretty dang similar to our antler deer per square mile. And then the number of hunters out of 100 that get one is 35. So again, real similar to the antler deer numbers.
Yep, and still quite a bit higher than the regional average of 28.
Yep. So we're doing pretty decent there. Then if we look at go on.
Sorry, just real quick. Delaware regs, from what I can Google quickly, you're allowed 2 antler deer a year. The Erner buck is not a thing anymore, if it was ever. But you're allowed 2 antler deer, and then you can also harvest antlerless deer. But the antler deer have to have a 15-inch spread, which I do not like whenever I hear that, because it's easier to count points than it is to try to guesstimate how big a spread is on a buck. But
I had to hunt with that restriction in Kentucky for a few years, and it is because just think to how many times you've had a buck, right? How often are they looking directly facing you? In theory, I don't want them ever to do that. I don't want to be able to actually see their spread, because the rule that every state I've hunted that has that restriction is, you just want to see it past the ears. Okay, well, that's great if they're looking at you. You can kind of, but if they're looking this way, that makes it tough. That makes it really tough.
Make it
easy.
And
what if their ears are in a weird position? You know?
Yeah.
Make it easy to do the right thing,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jason. I like the number of points better because it's and there is no perfect system. There isn't, but if you're trying to go for bigger bucks, I do like the number of points because it is more clear.
Yeah, this is I don't know if you can see that, but they have a little.
Yeah, trying to show you past the ears. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Outside spread of 15 inches. There you go.
And that's very hard to tell at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
When the deer's walking directly perpendicular to you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll say it's a little bit easier than like some of the sheep regulations for Alaska. Some of those you got to either count 9 or 11 rings of annuli on the sheep. It's got to be double broomed, or it's got to be, there's 3 different ways that you can get them, or it's full curl, which is super subjective, and they show you these pictures and this one's full curl and this one right next to it not quite. So anyway, there are some tricky things out there that hunters have to deal with, but luckily pretty straightforward in Illinois. We don't have any of that. No. I guess I shouldn't say luckily. I kind of like the point restrictions because it makes a lot of small bucks on the landscape, which just make it fun in the woods.
Cool. Well, we'll move right along to this kind of deer harvest trends. What I like about this section is it kind of moves away from, the class of the animal, the sex of the animal. Now we get into a little bit of equipment stuff. And so we'll first start off with just kind of a percent of harvest by bow or crossbow. And at this stage, we are just lumping those together in this report. So bow and crossbow, all that data is together. But Illinois actually made top 5. Though. What's that?
It would be cool to see it separate, because I don't know exactly how many states use crossbows, but with the ones that do, have it broken down further.
And that my guess would be that a lot of states probably don't ask in their harvest reporting whether it's a crossbow or a vertical bow or a traditional bow like we do in Illinois. So they're just lumping, that's an archery harvest, and they're just sending it off. But
all together.
Right. But New Jersey, 64% of their harvest, so they by far led. Ohio at 49% of the harvest was with archery equipment. Connecticut, 48%. Massachusetts, 46%. And no surprise, Illinois at 44% of our harvest was archery. The next is percent of harvest by rifle shotgun. This is very much going to be dominated by a lot of the western and southern states. No surprise to see Montana at the very top with 95% of their deer harvest being with a rifle or shotgun, basically with a firearm. And why? Well, you're a very open landscape there. You're taking long shots. Archery is quite difficult out in the western states. So none of these are really surprising to me. Again, Montana leads the pack, and 95% of their harvest is with a rifle or shotgun. Wyoming at 94%, South Carolina, Texas, and Alabama close it all at 87%.
Look at all the muzzleloaders in Rhode Island.
My guess
they
would
might
be
have special muzzleloader rigs.
Yeah.
Yep.
For 41%.
Yep.
And then Virginia doesn't surprise me. Honestly, if I had to pick a state that I would think would have muzzleloader, it would be Virginia.
Yeah.
Just, growing up in that area, rough area.
Oh yeah, they love their and
their old stuff.
Their old school muzzleloaders. Yeah.
Everybody uses their reenactment gun to just go hunting there.
Pennsylvania,
so it's like their great grandfathers.
Yeah, Pennsylvania has a specific flintlock season that's even a different muzzleloader season.
It's pretty cool.
Yep, I think Meat Eater does have a really good episode on that. If you're interested in watching that, I think
did they go and hunt there
flintlock
during that season?
Yeah, they went and hunted with.
Okay,
they actually went out with flintlocks, and it's something you got to think about because you can get your powder wet and everything else, and it's usually when there's snow on the ground on top of all that because it's late season at that point.
I like it.
I like some of those weird ones. Like I don't know, it makes me happy they're around.
Yeah, they're fun.
Even if they're not the most efficient,
You just got to remember to clean it after every single shot.
Trying to find out how many states allow crossbows without any stipulations, and I'm getting mixes between 27 to 30 states, depending on which resource I'm looking at here. As of right now, I think Oregon's the only state that outlaws crossbows entirely across the board for everybody.
I mean, my guess would be a lot of the western states are not going to allow crossbows during their archery seasons, but the Midwest, East, and South, I would assume the vast majority of them are going to.
That east of the Rocky Mountains, there's 37 states east of the Rocky Mountains, 30 of them allow crossbows. So 81% of the states, and then all the Southeast allows crossbows. So then it says 28 states allow crossbows during archery season, and 2 more allow them during the portion of archery season. So it's kind of redundant. But anyway, long story short, about 27 to 30 states allow crossbows with no handicap or any stipulation anymore.
That sounds about right.
Come around, yeah.
I do wonder too if some of those are starting to be. I mean, I know some not so much in the South, but with the Northeast, if it's also kind of like out here where your firearm season is pretty short. Like if it's kind of like give and take a little bit to be able to have,
Not really. I think honestly in Pennsylvania it was because the population of deer was too high. I mean, we switched over in 2006 when I turned. Well, no, wait. Yeah, 2006. That's when I turned 18. So 2006 is when they allowed crossbows for the first time, and they still didn't allow Sunday hunting. They're still working on that. But, so they started allowing that. But they also they always up the doe permits, and you only allowed 1 buck still, and you have to have 3 points on one side. So, but I don't know. I think it was just the deer population issue, especially for down Bucks County where I'm from outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah, so I grew up with a firearm deer hunter, so don't know.
Oh, to go back to your point, so but the firearm season there was 2 weeks for buck season, but then you had a month and a half for doe season, and you could buy up to there's probably 500,000 doe tags sold each year, give or take. So no, that was my point. So to answer your question that's a long gun season in a month and a half compared to
for you guys,
7 days.
Yeah. But like in Illinois, it's kind of nice because it's like, well, at least if it's not just like you either have to be really good, with the vertical bows, or you have a tiny firearm season. It's nice that it makes it a little more open for everybody.
I'm for it. I mean, like I said, I find with crossbows since I was 18. I'm happy with it.
I like to do both.
Bow. Yeah.
I'm I believe an equal opportunity. I'll use whatever I'm feeling that morning.
Yeah.
Honestly, is a good nap.
Yeah.
For real.
But we'll get back to this report here, kind of wrap up this episode. But one thing I want to talk about is we've kind of gone through all the different data sources on this, especially just in terms of like the harvest, age structure, things like that. But there's a lot more in this report outside of just harvest trends and harvest data. So I just want to, again, we're not going to sit here and go through all these different things, but there's an entire section on current issues and trends. So if you're wanting deer disease updates, they have updates on hemorrhagic disease, on COVID, on Eastern equine encephalitis, bovine tuberculosis, CWD. There's all this other information that's housed in this report that are outside of kind of what we talked about. But I do want to talk about something that I hadn't seen presented this way before in terms of CWD, and it's basically the average wait time to receive CWD results. And we get this question all the time, and I don't blame them. I still some days have that question too. Hey, I shot one. I want to get it tested. What do I do? Do I really have to wait until I get those test results? Well, now we at least have an idea of how long that's going to take to get those results. And so you can see Illinois is in a pretty good shape here, and they're increasing the time in which you're going to, or I should say they're decreasing the lag time. So back in 2019, it could take 4 to 6 weeks to get those test results. In 2024, the average was about 2 weeks. So that's really impactful for me as a hunter who cares about CWD and wants to make sure I'm eating CWD-free deer and feeding that to my friends and stuff. So definitely important. I just wanted to bring that up because, again, we get so many questions about how long does that take. And it looks like on average, we're at about 2 weeks. And if you compare every other state, that's, we're certainly not the quickest, but we're certainly not anywhere near the longest.
We're not Connecticut at 3 months.
Yeah.
Rhode Island was 3 months.
I mean, some have definitely improved a little bit. Some have gotten a little bit worse, but I wonder if that's also as CWD is spread. So
and that was one of the biggest lags back in like the 2019, probably when this was first taken, is there was only 1 or 2 labs in the entire country that did CWD testing. And then you saw all these states start to increase their testing. And so not only do you have this like limited labs that can do it, but now every state is doing way more sampling. And so it just really bogged the system down. But what this shows to me is, hey, they're starting to work through some of that. And hopefully we're going to start getting a lot more timely results for all these moving forward.
Yeah. For the listeners, sorry. The Southwest average is 21 days. The Northeast average is 52 days. The Midwest is 18 days.
Yep. 2 weeks. I'll take that.
35 days. Yeah. So the 2 weeks in there is a pretty good spot.
But it is interesting because you can see like Alabama in 2019 was a week, and now or in 2024 it was 3 to 4 weeks. So it's just kind of interesting to see how it shifts.
Yeah.
Probably a lot more animals being tested, I would guess.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's with the spread of it too. Daniel, but if that's it for the NDA one, you want to hop back over to the Illinois one and we can look at the age structure breakdown. I know that's in there in one of the tables.
Yep.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about it or look at it, but further on the report, it talks about like deer depredation tags and permits and just a lot of good stuff in there to check out.
I said something about deer depredation the other day. My husband was like, is that the right word for that? He's like, they're not really like predator. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he was like, I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that's the right word. Like, it's okay.
So unfortunately, Jason, it doesn't look like we have the level of breakdown that I thought we did. I thought we had more classifications. Adults. We basically have a fawn, a yearling, and an adult.
Okay.
So that just shows you why we don't have that data in the NDA report from Illinois. It's just the way they classify.
Yep. Yeah, NDA wanted to break down 2.5-year-old, 3.5-year-old, and we don't have. It's just a big lump sum on that one. So we're just going to have fawns versus male versus adult.
Yeah, it's basically 6-month-old here, 1.5-year-old, 2.5 plus. Those are kind of the only age breakdowns we have.
And for
looking at this, just
1.5 or less.
Yeah. But like anecdotally, like looking at this, you can see we're looking at a table right now. It has the breakdown of female and male, adult and fawn, and then the method of take in the season, be it archery, youth, firearm, muzzleloader, late winter, CWD, and then all seasons. But you look at like the harder it is to do, the more, or what was the breakdown here? So like the harder it is to do, kind of the more you see like fawns being taken versus like, and also the youth are trying to take more fawns, whereas for firearm season it's kind of easier to pick what you're going to get. So then the adult males are higher. Does that hold up?
Not really, because the firearm
the female adult,
it's actually higher.
The archery is actually during the rut, so the archery the male would be higher, and then for firearm the does are higher, so that's 37% there. Yeah, okay, never mind, it's the opposite of what I said.
I do like the one below. I think it's interesting, like the number of points by archery versus gun season. percentage. It's kind of an interesting breakdown.
But yeah, anything else to add on to these two reports? Again, we didn't want to sit here and go through every page. We just kind of wanted to hit some of the highlights, talk about what stood out to us, some of these cool findings. But highly recommend, check the links down below or in the description if you're listening through your favorite podcast catcher. Download these reports, especially the NDA one. It's just so robust. And like we've talked about, it's very much written for public consumption. So it's written like an outdoor hunting magazine. It uses that language. It's very digestible, very easy to read through, and it's a quick read. But I think you will get a lot out of it.
Learn
a lot
about
of nice
the other
pictures.
Yeah, and it's just a solid resource. I mean, it's one of those resources that you can hopefully trust in and kind of help with debunking some ideas you might hear one way or another, depending on what those are. I don't have really an example of any big conspiracy theories in deer hunting right now, but it's definitely the cut and dry. These are the facts that we have right now from harvesting and what it looks like across the country.
Yep. Awesome. Anything else to add as we kind of wrap up, you guys? All I know is I'm excited for turkey season. Whew.
Yeah. Next time we meet, we've gone turkey hunting.
Yeah, I started getting all my gear out last night, so I got a pile of stuff behind me. Got all my camping stuff,
all our clothes.
Calls.
So yes, treat the ticks are out, so treat your clothes, everybody.
Yep. Permethrin or Picard, and make sure you follow those label restrictions, but definitely worth the peace of mind of just knowing that you're a little bit safer out there from ticks than if you weren't treated.
Much. I found 4
also morel mushroom time. So morels are marching up Illinois. Depending on where you are in the state, you're either already finding them or you're about to be finding them soon. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, it's time to be looking.
And stay tuned to our Facebook page, especially. It's called Illinois Learn to Hunt Connection. But there's a lot of really good crowdsourced morel maps that kind of track this morel. I don't want to say migration, but essentially as they start to pop up. So Curtis does a really good job of sharing those updates quite regularly on that page. And so if you're interested just to kind of seeing, when should I go start looking for morels? Check out that Facebook page, Illinois Learn to Hunt Connection, and you'll be able to kind of see those updates as they come in. But it gives you a real good snapshot of, hey, are they actually popping out in my area yet? Or am I just going to go waste a day out there? So.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and with turkey, we have a brand new turkey web page up as well. So feel free to check that out. It's very in-depth, but if you have any questions, let us know. It links to a whole bunch of resources and graphics, and it's a lot of information, but hopefully it'll be helpful. We try to be as thorough as possible.
I like it.
That's awesome. Yep.
Well, you guys ready to go turkey hunting in a few days? Ooh, it's coming quick.
Let's go.
Hopefully the
weather I just want to play with traps now, but,
Yeah, we're excited. On the next episode, Lauren just got back from a big trap camp up in Wisconsin, so we're going to get to hear how that all went. We'll give kind of a rundown on how our Shawnee mentor turkey hunt goes over the next few days, and should be another good episode. So definitely subscribe, follow us on YouTube, however you like to get your podcast, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
See you guys.
See you.
Bye.